Hi, so welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to look at power chords. So what is a power chord? Well, a power chord is a two-note chord that is common in rock, pop and metal. So the official name for a power chord is a 5 chord. So if you ever see something like E5, A5, G5, B5 in a guitar tab or in music, then that is a power chord. So power chord is more of a slang term, whereas a 5 chord is more the official musical term. It's nothing to do with the 5th fret. The reason it's called a 5 chord is because it's the 1st and the 5th note of the major scale played at the same time. So the 7 notes in the major scale, and it's the 1st and the 5th note played together. So power chords are movable shapes. You can start them on any fret. Typically a power chord is played with the 1st and the 3rd finger. So if I put my 1st finger on the 1st fret on the thickest string, then my 3rd finger goes on the string below on the A string on the 3rd fret. And you just play these two strings together. You don't catch any other strings but just the two you're on. As I say, this is a movable shape, so you can move it up a fret, so the 2nd and the 4th fret, still using the 1st and 3rd finger. Move it up another fret to the 3rd and the 5th fret, 4th and 6th frets, 5th and 7th frets, and so on. You can also play the shape on the A and the D string, so still using your 1st and 3rd finger. Your 1st finger would be on the A string, your 3rd finger would be on the D string, and you just strum the A and the D string. So you don't play the thickest string now, you just strum the A and the D like this. You can also play it on the D and the G strings. Although this isn't as common because power chords are used in rock and metal and punk music quite often, and they're called power chords because they're quite punchy, rocking sounding chords. So they're often played on the lower strings and not as common on the higher strings. So quite often power chords are played where there's distortion on the amp, so like this. To give you that powerful, rocky sounding chord. So I mentioned earlier, a power chord is just 2 notes, but there is a 3-finger power chord. To play a 3-finger power chord, you put your little finger, your 4th finger, underneath the 3rd finger on the same fret on the string below. So if I'm playing a 2-finger power chord on the 1st fret on the low E, my 3rd finger being on the 3rd fret on the A, my little finger would also be on the 3rd fret, but on the D string. Then you play the thickest 3 strings together. Again, it's a movable shape, so I can move that 1 fret higher, another fret higher, and so on. So this gives you a more full sound. It is still a 2-note chord because the note your little finger on is the same as what the 1st finger is on, just an octave higher. So for example, if my 1st finger's on an F, then the little finger on the D string is also an F. And that applies to wherever you start the chord. So if you play a power chord from the 3rd fret, my 1st finger is on a G, and the little finger on the 5th fret on the D string is also a G, it's just an octave higher. So it is still a 2-note chord, but by adding the little finger it just gives you a more fuller sound. So you can also play a 3-finger power chord starting on the A string, so that would be the A, D and G strings, 1st finger on the A string, 3rd finger on the D string, and your 4th finger on the G. You would just then strum the A, D and G strings. So when playing a power chord, what you can do is lean the 1st finger back slightly to mute the finished strings. That way, if you get a bit carried away when you're strumming the chord and you catch the finished strings, it will mute them. Like this. So in a 3-finger power chord, I'd want to hear the thickest 3 strings, but then you wouldn't want to hear the finished 3. So by leaning the 1st finger back just slightly, it will mute those strings. If you lean the 1st finger back too much, those notes will ring out. So you don't want to do that with a power chord. So just lean it back slightly so it gently touches them, and when you're strumming, it will mute the finished strings. When playing a power chord on the A and the D strings, what you can do is use the tip of your first finger to touch the side of the thickest string, as well as leaning it back slightly on the thinnest ones to mute those. That way, if you accidentally catch the thickest string, the tip of the first finger will mute it, and then the back of the first finger will take care of the thinnest strings. That way you can be a bit more relaxed when you're strumming the power chord. You can play a 3-finger power chord starting on the D string, but the little finger doesn't go on the same fret as the 3rd finger. It actually goes 1 fret higher like this. The reason for that is to do with how the notes work on the guitar. So where you start this chord will dictate the first part of the name. So what I mean is, if you start on an F, then it's an F5 or an F power chord. If you start on a G, then it would become a G5 or a G power chord, and so on. And if you're not sure about what the notes are on the guitar, then watch my video, The Notes on the Fretboard. There are 3 common open position power chords as well: E5, A5 and D5, where you put your first finger on the 2nd fret on the A string and play the E and the A strings together. That's called E5. If I drop my finger down a string onto the D string but play the A and the D strings together, that is called A5. If I drop my finger down one more string onto the G string and play the D and the G strings together, that is called D5. So it's still a power chord, it's still 2 notes, but just using the 1 finger as opposed to the 2. So what they are is still a 2-finger power chord, but it's a 0, an open string, and the 2nd fret. When playing the power chords, make sure your thumb isn't too high over the guitar neck, so this will constrict your fingers. So just make sure it's parallel with the first finger, about centre of the back of the neck of the guitar. That way it will just help open your fingers up that little bit and help when you move the chord around. So you'll come across these power chords in a lot of famous songs, so I'd recommend that you get used to moving these shapes around. So one thing you can do is start on the 5th fret, for example, so your first finger on the 5th fret, your 3rd on the 7th fret on the string below, play those 2 strings, move the shape back 2 frets, move it back another 2 frets, and then back up 2 frets, and then back to the starting point. So just practice that sequence. You can also try moving the shape across strings too. So you could play a power chord on the E and the A string, drop your fingers down a string to the A and the D, maybe go up 2 frets, back to the previous chord, and then back to the starting point, and then just loop that sequence. So just experiment moving this power chord shape around, and it will really help when learning your favourite songs. Thanks for watching this video, and let me know how you get on in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.